Begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Kidushin Daf Nun Zayin. Begin 9 lines down at the top of the Amud. But the Gemara continues the theme of our previous Mishnah, which we mentioned all these things that are shiur hana. So if it's you can't have any benefit from it, obviously you cannot use it because it looks like a fat cow. It doesn't make a difference. It's not worth anything because you can't have any benefit. The Gemara continues to go through these items one by one to show how there's an isser hana on them, and hence they would not be a kedushin. The next item we mentioned in the Mishnah. Shiur corresponds to Kazakh and the Chazak return to Daf Achim, return to today's Daf. So discussing today's Daf are sources for items that are asa b'hana, the halacha of tzipor mitzayra, specifically great length about that, about the birds of mitzayra, and at what point do the mitzayra become asa b'hana? It says when you slaughter it, which is two different birds, as we'll explain the Gemara, and Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg from when you buy it. Halacha of egla rufa, the decapitated calf, and petach hamar regarding the firstborn donkey, which you have to either redeem it or you have to decapitate it. Machlek is whether the petach hamar is asa b'hana. Machlek is regarding basa b'chala, whether it's merely asa b'chila or also asa b'hana. So we had said, like in the Mishnah, that all these different items, because the item has no value, and the Gemara continues now with the fourth item that we mentioned, the egla arufa. So the fourth item that we said that is not going to be kedushin is the animal that they bring to decapitate it, the calf. When they find the dead body in between two cities, the closest city has to bring this atonement. But now, what do we know that's asa b'hana? Some of the Rabbi Shloimy says kaparik sibba, because the pasuk says in the pasuk when it talks about, it says kapela amchi Yisrael in Devarim Chaf Aleph. So the word kapara atonement is kakadshim, is like kadshim, which always brings atonement. Now kadshim asa b'hana, as we find the halacha of me'ila bayit. So therefore, the same thing would apply to the halacha of egla ruf. The next item we mentioned in Mishnah number 5 was tzipayim mitzayra, the birds of the mitzayra. Now the birds of mitzayra, as the Gemara is about to tell us, they are machshirei. They're not actual atonements themselves. They prepare the mitzayra, and it's also done outside of the azar. It's not done in the Beis Hamikdash because the mitzvah is to do it out of the city, and all it does is machshir. It prepares the mitzvah that it could come into the machna. So there's two things. It's a machshirei chutz. So the Gemara, that's going to be important because the Gemara says, "Where do we know that they're forbidden to have anah?" Because the Tanna Rabbi Shloimy taught in the Brisa, nemer machshir. It mentions those things that prepare bifnim, inside the azara, which an asham mitzayra doesn't really, it doesn't do any atonement. It actually just permits the mitzayra to eat kadshim. And umechaper. We also mentioned an atonement mibifnim, which all karbanas are atonement. They provide kapara. Now, with never machshir, there's also a machshir, like we said, the tzipor mitzayra are not machaper per se. They only prepare him, allow him to come into the machne. Umechaper mibachutz. And there are things that atone on the outside, like we just mentioned before. The egla rufa is not done in the Beis Hamikdash, yet it atones. Okay, so what do we want with these four items? So we're going to compare. Just like the things that only prepare and the things that atone, which are mentioned that are done inside the azara. You made the thing that prepares like the thing that atones, meaning there's no difference between Hasham Tzayra and other Hashamas. Other Hashamas which are mechaper are no different than Hasham Tzayra, which is a machshir. So af machshir mechaper am b'chutz. And then same thing is for those that prepare and atone that are done out of the Beis Hamikdash. You should also be asa b'machshir k'mechaper. You should make the thing that prepares like the thing that atones, which tells us that the tzipore mitzayra, which are machshir, are going to be like the egla rufa, which is mechaper, which is also done outside. And we just mentioned before that the egla rufa is asa b'hana. So too, the tzipore mitzayra will also be asa b'hana. That's how we know tzipore mitzayra asa b'hana. Now, however, okay, we know they're asa b'hana. Now the Gemara says itmar how to qualify this. From when do the birds of the mitzayra become forbidden to have enough in them? So it's machlekes. Rabbi Shloimy says mishar shchita. There's two birds. One bird is slaughtered, and one bird is sent away. So and that Rabbi Shloimy says, from when you slaughter the slaughtered one, it becomes forbidden. But the bird who is sent away, as the Gemara is going to tell us later, is actually permitted. Rabbi Shloimy says mishas lekicha. When you buy the birds, they're both forbidden until you send away the one that gets sent away. Then when you send it away, it becomes permitted. That's a machlekes Rabbi Shloimy. So the Gemara explains the two opinions. Rabbi Shloimy says it becomes forbidden when you slaughter it, because shchitu d'asrla. It's the slaughtering that makes it forbidden. When you buy them, it's not making it forbidden. Rish Lakish says Mishas he says no, it's when you buy it. Why? Because he says Be'egla Rufa Nafka. We just mentioned before we learned that the Machshir from the Mechaper. We learned that it's Mitzayra from Egla Rufa. So we'll say Ma Egla Rufa Michayim. Just like the decapitated calf becomes forbidden when it's still alive, like Kidushin, which is where we learn out Egla Rufa from, which says Mechaper, which is the edits of Mechaper, and therefore it's forbidden Michayim like Kidushin. So to the birds of the Mitzayr will also be forbidden when they're still alive. It says the Gemara, Ve'egla Rufa Gufa Me'emesai. Okay, if you're learning about Tzipar Mitzayr and Egla Rufa, now let's understand that from when does the Egla Rufa become forbidden? Because since his monies are not sanctified, doesn't have a Kidushin Mizbeach, doesn't have a Kidushin B'degabayis, rather it itself is decapitated. So if that's the case, it can't be when you bought it. So when exactly does the Egla Rufa become forbidden? So Rabbi Yanni says, Gevul Shemati B'Veshachachti says, I once heard a line regarding it, but I forgot when it becomes forbidden. But my friends, my colleagues are inclined to say that it's when you bring it down to the hard valley, which is what causes over there for it to be decapitated, is what's Yisrael, is what makes it forbidden. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If you tell me the decapitated calf, you tell me the decapitated calf, when you buy it, it doesn't become forbidden. Then you're learning Tzipar Mitzayr from there. How could Tzipar Mitzayr itself become forbidden when you buy it? So no, how could you compare the cases? Hasam islik v'lachrina. There, by the Egla Rufa, it has a different boundary. It has a categorization that you could give it regarding when you bring it to the Nachal Eisen. Hacham islik v'lachrina. Here, by the birds, is there some other gvul? Since you're learning it out, that should be forbidden when it's still alive. Obviously, it's the vine that caused it, because when else should we say, besides when you're doing the shechita, which we're saying it's not, it's when it's still alive, that's going to be forbidden. Therefore, it's going to be when you buy it. What? Oh, why it should be when you buy it. Right, so Rashi makes it sound like that the Gemara's question was, since its monies are not Kedushin, there's no holiness to them, so it's what would make it holy when you buy it? It's only the arif that causes it. But we know it's also when it's michayim, so therefore it's going to be when you bring it to nachal. The Taisa actually says, but he said, why don't you say when you bring the birds? Is like when you take down the egla rufa to the place. So he says a difference between them, but kapanim, that's what the Gemara is saying. There's no other gvul, so we're going to say it's going to be when you buy it. Now, Rabbi Shloimy who says that the Isser is when you buy it, he asks him a pasuk in Devar. Pasuk says, "Kol tzipar tahayru techelo." Torah says every kosher bird you're allowed to eat. Now, the word kol is a riboy, is inclusionary terminology. What's that coming to tell us? The Rambam Esem Shalach is coming to include the bird that's sent away from the Mitzayra. Now, afterwards it says, in the Torah, this is talking about where the kosher animals are mentioned. It said, and this is from what you should not eat. The Torah specifies which birds are not kosher, because there's more kosher birds than non-kosher birds. Now, but the word asher, that is a riboy, is inclusionary terminology. What are we coming to include that you cannot eat from? That's coming to include the slaughtered bird, that you cannot eat from it. So we have a special riboy to say the sent away bird you could eat, and then we have a special riboy to say but the slaughtered one of the tzipar mitzvah you cannot eat. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan asked Rish Lakish. If you think to say like you, Rish Lakish, that the birds become forbidden when you buy it, when it's still alive. So why do I need a pasuk to tell me it's forbidden after you slaughter it? I could understand that you need a pasuk to say that the birds you send away are going to be permitted because it was forbidden when it was still alive, according to what you're saying. But the isser of the slaughtered bird, why do I need? It's just like Egla Rufa, where it's forbidden already when it's still alive. Why do I need a special pasuk to say it's going to be forbidden when you slaughter it? It was already forbidden. So the Gemara says, why would you say midah akachim? Maybe it's going to be the same thing as like regarding kachim, that you're right. Kachim are forbidden when it's still alive. But the asir shchita machshulahu, but actually the slaughtering comes along and actually validates it with all the other avodas and actually makes it permitted. He also, I would think to say that actually it becomes kosher after you finish the mitzvah and you actually slaughter it, Mashon is saying that no, that when you slaughter it, it's still going to be aser. That's what the word asher includes, that the shchut is going to be forbidden. But the Gemara continues to ask Rish Lakish, now from the Mishnah Masechet Negoyim. The Mishnah says, shchata, if someone slaughters the tzipor of the mitzayra, v'nimtzis terefa, and then you find it that it's a treifa, which is puzzle for the purification of the mitzayra, because the pasuk says chayis, that they have to be with life, vitality. Now the Gemara assumes when they checked the samanim, they found there was a treifa when it was slaughtered, because meaning during the slaughtering, because there was a treifa from before. For example, let's say it had a hole in its membrane of its skull, of its brain, or let's say its foot was cut off. You wouldn't be able to say the word v'nimtzis, that you find it to be treifa. It was treifa. Now, v'nimtzis treifa sounds like that it became a treifa during the shechita. Okay, so what do? Yikach zog l'shniya. So you take a pair for the second one, meaning you don't have to bring two other birds. You just for the one that you're sending away will stay the same. You bring another one to pair up for the other one. For the shaina, and the first bird, which turns out to be a treifa, is muteres bahana. You're allowed to have hana from it, which the Gemara assumes for Rabbi Yechanan that the shechita is what making it forbidden, and the problem is that this is not a shechita. So Rabbi Yechanan says, Rish Lakish, these are if you think to say that the birds are forbidden when they're still alive, why is the first one permitted to have benefit? Maybe when you bought it, it was fit. It wasn't the treifa yet. So where was the Isra permitted? According to Rabbi Yechanan, it makes sense, because the shechita what makes it forbidden. So, and it wasn't a shechita. According to Rish Lakish, that it's aser michayim. So when you bought it was aser, what's permitting its Isra? So Malay, Rish Lakish, we're talking about where it was found to be a treifa in its intestines, meaning when you bought it, it was not fit, and therefore the Isra never took effect in it even when you bought it. Because the lechala kedusha klal, no sanctity took effect in it at all, because as Taisa says, when you find a mortal defect in its intestines, you could say nimtzis because you couldn't see it. So you're able to say the word nimtzas, but at the same time, when you bought it, it was not fit, so therefore it was never asr, even mishas lekicha, because it was a treifa. Okay, so the Gemara Rabbi Yechanan continues to ask on Rish Lakish. So again, Rish Lakish holds that Isra is not mishchit; it's already asr meichayim from when you buy it. From the following brayso, the brayso says shechata, if you slaughter the tzipar mitzayra shaloi be'ezav, not with a hesed, shaloi be'etz erez, not with a cedar wood, which these are all items you're supposed to bring together. But shaloi be'shnei is not with the red thread. So Rabbi Yaakov says hoyel b'huk to the mitzvah sasur, since it was ultimately set aside for the mitzvah, it's still going to be forbidden. Shimon says no. Since it was slaughtered not like the way the Torah said, has to have these other items with it, and it didn't, it's going to be permitted. But one thing says Rabbi Yechanan, until here where we have the machlekes elamasa is only because Rabbi Yaakov holds shchita sheineruya, we never slaughtered, which is not fit for its mitzvah because you didn't have all the items. Still he holds shema shchita, still considered shchita to make it forbidden. Umar saber, but the other Tana Rabbi Shimon holds shchita sheineruya lo shema shchita. When you do a shchita that's not fit, it's not considered shchita, so therefore it's not going to be asur. But according to everyone, one thing we do see is mechaim lemitzvah, that when it's still alive, it's not forbidden because it would be asur. So how would the issa be removed, even if it was a shchita sheneruya? Obviously, everyone holds not like Rish Lakish. Says the Gemara, you're right. Tanoihi. These tanoim hold like you said, that it's not going to be forbidden. But the Tana Rabbi Shmuel that the Gemara is going to quote right now, that learns out machshir from mechaper, holds that it will be forbidden when they're still alive, like the mechaper, like other karbanos, which are forbidden when they're still alive. The Tana Rabbi Shmuel, which we mentioned before, the same idea. It says about things that validate and things that atone in the azar. It said things that validate and atone out of the azar. Just like the things that prepare and atone that I mentioned inside, let's say Hasham Etzara and other Hashamas. Also, the ones that validate are the same like the ones that atone. So do those things that validate, which is the tzipur mitzayra, and those things that atone, which is the egla roof, and I mentioned out of the azar. We're going to make the tzipur mitzayra like the egla roof, and just like egla roof is going to be forbidden mechaim, so too is the tzipur mitzayra is going to be asa mechaim. That's Rish Lakish, is my source. But you're right, you have tanon that say like you. So that's a machlekes tanoim. Now, Gufa, the Gemara goes back to a brisa we mentioned in one of the sources that Rabbi Yechon was asking on Rish Lakish. So we learned called Tzipa Torah Techelu. The pasuk says that all kosher birds you should eat. So the brisa had said coming to include that the bird that's sent away, that the halacha is that bird is going to be permitted to be eaten. And then when it says V'zeh asher lo yisaychem, this are the birds that you should not eat from them. The word asher is an extra word. To include the slaughtered tzibah mitzvah that it's forbidden to be eaten. So the Gemara says, how do you know? Maybe I should say the exact opposite. Maybe V'zeh asher lo yisaychlu is including the b'shalachas. Maybe the bird that's sent away is forbidden, and the bird that's slaughtered is actually permitted to be eaten. How do you know it's that way? So the Gemara has a few shatim. We don't find living creatures that are forbidden forever, and therefore wouldn't make sense the bird that's sent away is going to be forbidden. So on that the Gemara says, really? You don't have any living creatures that are forbidden forever? We have muktzah. We have not the muktzah of Shabbos, but an animal that's set aside for idolatry sacrifices, which is forbidden for hektish. As the Gemara says in Timur, it says min habehema, you should take your karbanis from the animal. What's min is excluding an animal that was sodomized a woman. When it says min habakar, from the cattle, is excluding if it was actually worship, and min hatzain is further excluding even if it was just set aside. And v'nevad, and also if let's say it was worship, was bowed down to the Baal Chaim, which they're living creatures, and they are forbidden. You see, a living creature could be forbidden forever. Says, yeah, but here, see, when they forbidden is like Vaya, it's for Hashem. But for a regular person permitted, we don't find a living creature that's forbidden. It wouldn't make sense that the bird that's sent away is going to be forbidden. Karbanos that were lost and found, but you say you could bring it as a carbon. Right, but it won't be forbidden forever. He was saying that there's Isser Hana. These things are forbidden totality. But the Gemara does. Oh, so that's going to be one of the other problems in the Gemara. But the Gemara says, Maskev Rabbi Yomi. Remember, he asks, he says, what do you mean? You have the animal that sodomized or was sodomized with people, Ba'edim, if there's witnesses, Balachayim knew that they're living creatures of Assyria, and they are forbidden because they actually have to be stoned. As the pasuk says, Bikachav, you have to kill the woman and the animal, and the one that was sodomized by a man. It says Vesabei Metaregu, which we learn on Daf Nanvav Mabeis. We learned that once the verdict was handed down, they're forbidden even if you slaughter it. And the reason why we're picking Be'edim is because it doesn't get stoned if it was just one witness, as the Gemara says in Baba Kam Daf Dal Mabeis. The way you kill a person is that's how you kill an ox. So, but you do have a case of an animal being forbidden forever. So, Elam Rabbi Yechi says you're right, but limits in the Roiv Balachem Shazum. Most of the time, you don't find living creatures that are forbidden, and therefore, if we can have a choice between the slaughtered one or one that's sent away, we're going to say that the slaughtered one is going to be forbidden, but the living one is not going to be the one forbidden. That's you should send away this second bird on the face of the field, which teaches kesada, like a field. Masa the muter, just like a field is permitted. So too, this bird is also going to be permitted. Says Gemara, really? High sad l'hachu da'asa? I mean, that's what the word sad is coming to teach. It's permitted like a field. You need it like we learned the following brisa. Sada, it's a field. What does that mean that you send it on the field? A person should not stand on the walls of Yafa, which are by the sea, because you can and throw it towards the sea. Or Begevas, which is on the walls, are facing the desert, because you can midbar and throw it towards the desert, because it says Sadeh. You have to throw it along a field. And you shouldn't stand out of a city, because you can and throw it towards the city. Rather, it's when you're standing in the city, because you can and you throw it out of the walls of the city, because it says you have to send a living bird out of the city. The inference is that you're standing in the city and you're sending it out of the city. Because if you're standing out of the city, what's v'shilach ha'mechutz la'ir that you have over there? You already were, before you sent it, you were out of the city. So you see that you have to send it out of the city onto the fields. So that's what Sadeh teaches, not that it's permitted like a field. How can you say that's where you learn enough from? But the other Tana would tell you, imkei nichtav cross Sadeh. It should have just said v'shilach al panei Sadeh. My hasadeh, the extra hey, Yishma min we learn two things, that not only do you send it onto a field, but it's also permitted like a field, and that's the second source how you know that the mishalachas, the bird that's sent away, is permitted. Rav Amma, he says a third source. He says it's svara, it's logic that the bird that's sent away is permitted, like someone just said before. The Torah is not going to send away a bird to cause a stumbling, where it's going to be a michshal of an oven, where a person's going to trap the bird and is going to eat it. How can you say that the bird's going to be forbidden? You have this bird flying around that's forbidden. Now, we brought a pasuk before that includes the mishalachas that's going to be permitted. It's a svara. Says Rashi, that's an asmach ba'alma, but really we know it from svara, like the third shot of Rava says. The next item we said in the Mishnah is Basar Nazar. Let's say his beautiful Nazar, this beautiful blonde hair, and after his Naziris, he cuts off the hair, and he goes to this woman, he says, you see these beautiful eyes? She's like, I love this extensions, wow, beautiful hair. He says, I was a Nazar not so long ago. That's why I became so righteous. I was in Yerushalayim, I was in the program, Kiruv, and this and that. And here's my beautiful hair. She's like, I love this. I'll marry you for this. Says the Mishnah, no, it's forbidden to have hana from the hair of a Nazir. Says Imam Anon, where do we know this from? That he cannot be Mekadosh Yisha with this. The pasuk says, it should be holy. Gadil pera, the tresses that grow long, sa roisha, the hair on his head, which teaches Gidula Yeh Kodesh. His growth should be holy. Because like Rashi points out, there's no vav. So although it says Kadosh, we can read it as Kodesh, which this is one of the 13 places we have Messiah that it's missing a vav. So instead of reading it as Kadosh, we should read it as Yeh Kodesh. So therefore, it's going to be holy. So the Gemara says, wait a second, Ima Kodesh, if you're saying just like by Kadshim, Taiva says, what happens is when you take a Kadshim item and you transfer it onto the funds now get the sanctity, and now the animal goes out to chulin. So afsar nazir, so then they hear the nazir should also say the same thing. It should transfer onto the monies and go out to chulin to be forbidden. But our Mishnah said that kiddush b'dmeim, if he takes these beautiful tresses and he sells it to someone, he deconsecrates or whatever, the funds now he could use them mekadosh to isha. I thought you said that it should like kadshim. So the Gemara says, yeah, but mi karinan kodesh. You think we read it kodesh? Kadosh karinan. That's why we read it. There's two things. There's the way it's written and the way it's read. We read it kadosh to exclude its value, its monies, that there is no halacha of kedusha on it. Kodesh, says Rashi, sounds like a shame of kedusha. Kadosh sounds like it is kadosh, but other things that come from it are not kodesh. Therefore, we read it kadosh, but we could also expand it as kodesh to say that it's going to be also like kadshim, but its monies will be permitted. And that's how the source that we know that Sar Nazir is also Banan, that we cannot be Mekadosh Ish with that. Next time we said in the Mishnah number 7 was Pepetach Hamor, the firstborn donkey. Says the Gemara, name us like Rabbi Shimon. Let's say our Mishnah, which is a machlekes Rabbi Yehuda Shimon in Masechtas Becharos, is not like Rabbi Shimon. We're in the Brisa. Petach Hamor, the firstborn donkey, Aser Bahana, is forbidden to have benefit to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Mati says it's permitted. So obviously our Mishnah is not like him. He says no. We're talking about after the person refused to redeem it. Then with halacha is you have to decapitate the firstborn donkey. The Rakhot's going like everyone because the Gemara says over there, Rabbi Shimon agrees after the arifa that's aser because you learn arifa from egla rufa, just like egla rufa is forbidden to have benefit. So over here when you decapitate the donkey, it's also going to be forbidden to have benefit. The next item number 8 is basa b'chalav. When you have the cholent and you have the little kid's milk bottle spills into the cholent, that is going to be aser, not only b'achila, but also b'hana. Says Imam Anon, where do we know that if he takes this great cholent and he says to the starving woman, says, Harid Mukadeshas li b'cholent zu, and sorry, it's basa b'chalav, it's aser b'hana, you can't do a Kidushin. How do we know this one? Learn the Brisa Rabbi Shmuel, it says 3 times, which most people know from how they sing it along when it ends the aliyah. It says in Shemais and Shemais, and Devarim, it says 3 times the pasuk loisav ashal gedi b'chalevi my gimel pam 3 times. What's it coming to teach me? Why I say 3 times? Don't cook a kid goat in its mother's milk. Echad esachil, one's the prohibition about eating. Echad es I know one's the prohibition about have benefit. Echad es one's the prohibition about cooking. There's actual issur to cook, so you have to be careful when you spill your hot cholent into the garbage and there's milk over there. You have to be careful because you might be cooking. There's an issur of basa b'chalav, even of just cooking. So therefore you see that the Isahana says the Gemara like Kaitana, the Tanya. So our Mishnah is obviously not like the following Tana that's in the following Brisa. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda, he says, Basa b'chalav asa b'achila. You're not allowed to eat a mixture of meat and milk. But Umutbanoi says it is permitted to have benefit. Someone says pasuk in Devarim, Ki am kadosh ata l'Hashem elikecha, because you are a holy people to Hashem your God. Don't cook the kid in his mother's milk. So it says the word am kadosh. It says over there in Shemais, when it talks about, it says v'anshe kodesh tiyonli, a holy people you should be for me. It says over there that meat in the field that's a treifa, you shouldn't eat it. You throw it to the dogs. Malal just like over there, asabachili not allowed to eat the treifa animal, but you're allowed to have benefit because it says in the pasuk over there like kelvtash, nice to give it to the dogs. Afkando. So over here where it says holy people, asabachili mutbano, you're not allowed to eat the basabachalav, but you're allowed to have benefit from the cheeseburger. Where the guy didn't know it wasn't tofu cheese, it was real cheese, and he made the basar b'chalav, you're allowed to go ahead and sell it to, hey, John, you want to pay me $1.25 for this cheeseburger? It's better than McDonald's because it's kosher beef and it's more expensive. So that would be the machlokes that he would hold, not like our Mishnah, that would be mutabana, and our Mishnah holds asabana. The next item, number 9, that we mentioned in the Mishnah was b'chulin shenishkel bazar, that if you have an unconsecrated animal, not a carbon, they're slaughtering the azar in the courtyard, it's going to be asr b'hanam, and not says, where do we know this from? So Amr B'Yechid Mishum Meir says, because Amr Torah, the Torah says like this, shachit li b'shali. Hashem says, slaughter what's mine by me. Meaning slaughter my karbanos in my courtyard. Like it says in the beginning of Sefer Yikar, b'shachad is ben abakar, you slaughter the carbon in the azar. V'shalcha b'shalcha. Slaughter yours by you, like it says in the Daf Yomi. You should slaughter from your sheep, from your flock, which the pasuk says there at the end, b'sharecha, in your gates. So we make the following comparison. Mashali b'shalcha asa, just like mine by yours is forbidden to have hana, because who's going to permit the hana, which was already forbidden when the carbon was still alive, after the blood is not sprayed where it's supposed to be sprayed? Afshalcha b'shali asa. So to yours by me is also going to be forbidden to have benefit, because we compare the two of them. And then says the Gemara, wait a second. If just like mine, meaning the kabbanis, by you in your town is a punishment on the shkaris, you get karas, so then you'll say afshalcha b'shali on the shkaris. When you slaughter your choline animal in my courtyard, will also be a punishment of karas. Now amakar pasuk v'yikra v'pesach el moed lo hiviu laharkav carbon lashem. To the opening of the el moed does not bring to slaughter a carbon to Hashem v'nichres, and you get karas, which teaches you al carbon on the shkaris. Only by a carbon when you do shchutei chutz you can get a punishment of karas. Al chulin shenishkel bazar, but the other way, al chulin slaughtering bazar, ain't on the shkaris, you're not going to get a punishment of karas. But then says the Gemara, if that's the case, that you have this discrepancy, then actually ikal mifrach, then you could actually use that as a question. Ma lishali b'shalcha. If you can, how could you compare mine by you? Shekin on the shkaris, the punishment of karas. Maybe that's what it's also about now. Who's to say that yours by me also about now if it doesn't have the chumrah of punishment of karas? So you're right. Elam Abaye Mahacha. Abaye actually brings a different source. He brings, there's 3 parashas near each other when it talks about shlamim, but the first one it says ushachatay. It says ushachatay pesach al mayid. Then by the second one it says b'shachat oisai, and then it says b'shachat oisai. Plus a kra yiseri. 3 extra psukim. Matam aloyma. What's it coming to teach us? These 3 miutim, because it sounds like from all of them that this is slaughtered in the azara, but not something else. The fish, and the Mikra says in the pasuk in the bottom, if the place is going to be far from you, and you're going to slaughter, meaning the pasuk is coming to permit for them their own meat that they want to eat when they came to Eretz Yisrael, where they're living far from the Mishkan, because in the Midbar, no one's allowed to eat any meat that was fit to be brought as a carbon, only if you brought it as a carbon. When they came to Eretz Yisrael, they were permitted. So explains the Gemara, Berichig Makam, when you're far away out of the base of Mikdash, then you could slaughter your chulin. You cannot slaughter your grilling in the close place in the Azara, which is close to Hashem. That's excluding that chulin should not be slaughtered in the Azara. Okay, but I would only know unblemished animal because harum the karav, that they're fit to be brought as a carbon. That's the pasuk talking about. Because not fit to be brought as a carbon, that meat was never forbidden even in the midbar. It was only that which could have been brought as a carbon. But now I know that even blemished animals are also going to have the same halacha that it cannot be slaughtered in the azara. The reason I'm going to include blemished animals, it's at least from the same species, which is kosher to be brought as a carbon. And since it's similar to that regarding that, so you're going to learn that from a mamatzinu to be stringent and say it's also going to be forbidden to slaughter in the azara. How do I know to include even a wild animal? So I'm going to include a wild animal, because ultimately it also has halacha of slaughtering like a behema, where actually there's a pasuk by Psulei Magdashin that compares it in this parsha. It says Ach kashayochel esatzvi, and with the Gemara in Chulin Daf Chavches Menalef compares just like Psulei Magdashin are with shchita, so too deer and other chayas are also with shchita. And since regarding shchita is where they compared, so you can learn that also that there shouldn't be shchita in the azar because anything of that slaughtering, the Torah is saying is forbidden. Okay, but how do you know to include birds where there is no shchita that's mafurish in the Torah regarding birds? How do I know that it's going to have also the same halacha? It says in the pasuk v'shachatu, v'shachataisai. Meaning, what we mean to say by quoting these three psukim again, what we mean to say, where the Bach explains, one is including blemished animals, one is including wild animals, and one is including birds, and not that one is the Isra Achila even b'diavad. Says Rashi, the bottom line of Rashi, that we already said Ma ben Yisachayim, already including from a Mamatzino. So Rashi says what the Bryce was saying was, if there was no pasuk, then I could say that we're going to include the chaya b'daichik, like I'll push it in. But I have three psukim to teach you. One is including the birds, one's including the chayas, and one's including the bali mumin. That's how I know that birds are also included in this isser of chulin bazar. Now, yachal lo yishkod. You would think, okay, you're not allowed to slaughter. But if you did slaughter, okay, the animal will be permitted to be eaten. It says in the pasuk, if the place where you're slaughtering is going to be far from the base of Mikdash, then you could slaughter, and b'chata, then you could eat it. Meaning, what you're slaughtering from far away is that you could eat. But you're not allowed to eat what's slaughtered in the close place. Therefore, that's excluding chulin that was slaughtered in the azara. It's going to be forbidden to be eaten. Now, mainly as we continue to I would only know unblemished animals are normally cut if they are fit to be sacrificed. Meaning, we spoke about the Isra Shchita, now we're talking about the Isra Achila. How do we know to include also blemished animals? So I'm going to include blemished animals. It's the same species that are from that which is valid to be brought as a carbon. Now the Rabbi Tzachai, how do you include a wild animal? I'm going to include a chaya because it's also similar to behemoth with shchita. Now the Rabbi Tzachai was not mafurish in the Torah shchita. It says in both is like Rashi explains, since we're including these species regarding the Isra Shchita, we're also going to include them for the Isra regarding Achila, just like when they're unblemished. Now, you would think, okay, you're not allowed to slaughter. But if you slaughtered, we know you're not allowed to eat it, but maybe I would think you're allowed to throw it in front of the dogs. It says in the pasuk by the treifa, it says like kelv tashlichin oisai. To the dogs, you're going to throw it. What's it? Of course, we're talking about it there by the treifa. Oh, to teach you oisai to mashlach lekel, it's only the treifa that you're not allowed to eat that, but you could have a nah by throwing it to the dogs. But you're not allowed to throw it to the dogs. Chulin that was slaughtered in the azar, and that's how Rashi says where we learn out the halacha of chulin from, because that pasuk is talking about meat that went out from its partitions. For example, if you have a fetus that stuck its hand out when the mother was being slaughtered, the Gemara learns of in that pasuk that it's aser. It's not permitted with the shechita of the mother. So when it says ubaser basadeh, when there was meat in the field, for example, when there was meat that was in the field, meaning out of its partitions, meaning out in the open like a field, which does not have mechitzas, that's the pasuk saying it's like a treifa and you're not allowed to eat it. So that's what the pasuk at the end is excluding and saying, oh, that when it went out of its mechitzas, like the fetus sticking its hand out of the mother's womb, that's not permitted with the mother's slaughter. Like kelev tashlichin, I said that's where you could throw it to the dogs. That excludes chulin that was slaughtered in the azara, which we darshan that oisoi only by the treifa where it was forbidden because it went out of its mechitzas. That's where the kelev tashlichin I said that's permitted to have anah, but not chulin shenesh bazar, which Rashi explains becomes forbidden by going into mechitzas. Going into the azar, that's going to be usher even bahana. That was the final item that we learned in the Mishnah that we said that's going to have isra b'no, and therefore it's not going to be a valid kedushin. Thank you to any time.